Welcome to the Daily Fantasy 5, everybody, for this Saturday, June 29th. This is episode 131, and we are bringing you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. And today we have 2 baseball stories, and then we're going to be doing our wide receiver sleepers for this fantasy season. So we'll get to all that after a word from our sponsor, www.mathradio.com, where you can pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99. This course will help your child, ages 7 through 17, to score higher in school, get better grades on exams, and even get into college. Once again, that is www.mathradio.com. All right, folks, let's talk about some injuries in Major League Baseball that have fantasy ramifications before we get over to the NFL fantasy sleepers at the wide receiver position. All right, so the St. Louis Cardinals outfielder Marcell Ozuna is headed to the injured list with a finger injury. It has not been disclosed whether that finger was fractured or not. Obviously, a strain, he'll be back faster than if he has actually broken his finger. We will see in the coming days. He's been batting .259 this season with 20 home runs. Not too shabby. Staying in the NL Central, the Chicago Cubs veteran pitcher Cole Hamels is headed to the injured list as well with an oblique injury. He has been also doing very well this season. He has a 2.98 ERA. He has 6 wins, 97 strikeouts, and a 1.2 WHIP. So those are two very high-profile players going to the IL today. All right, that's it for the fantasy news for today. Let's head over and talk about our wide receiver sleepers for this fantasy season. We're going to start with the highest drafted player, and that is Chargers' Mike Williams. He landed in the top 20 last year as far as wide receivers went, but he's certainly not being drafted that way this season, which is why I like him as a wide receiver sleeper. He's going as wide receiver 30th. He is 79th overall. Now, I didn't have him in my top 20, but he's right on the cusp of that group. I think 30 is just way too low. He left in free agency, which means he might Terrell Williams, not Mike Williams, left in free agency, which means Mike Williams should have at least 100 targets this season. Allen is obviously still the number one receiver in Los Angeles, but in year 3, Mike Williams should be looking to make a jump. He could easily land in the top 20 again. I think it's great value when you don't have to draft him until, the 7th round. Maybe you can get him, maybe late 6th round, something like that. Pretty good value. Let's see. He knows how to get in the end zone. Last year, he scored 10 touchdowns. Gives him a big boost in targets. He could find himself finishing actually in the top 12. For a wide receiver who's going outside, who's being drafted as a 30th wide receiver, if you can get upside as a top 12 wide receiver, that is great value in fantasy drafts. I'm trying to pick up Mike Williams in as many drafts as I can around that 6th, 7th, 8th round, somewhere in there. All right, my next guy on the sleeper list is Dede Westbrook. He's going 98th overall, so we're moving on down the line here. He has been on basically every one of my fantasy teams so far this year. He's being drafted as the 35th wide receiver overall. Westbrook, it's his 3rd season in the league, and it'll be his first with a real quarterback. All right, Jacksonville has been god-awful the last few years. Dede saw his targets double his sophomore campaign, where he caught 66 balls on 101 targets. Nick Foles comes to town as the new quarterback now. He's certainly not elite, but it should be a massive upgrade over Blake Bortles. This should provide several more scoring opportunities for Westbrook. Let's say he has a 20% increase in his targets. We should see Westbrook get close to 80 receptions this season. And those targets are going to be a better quality because they're coming from Nick Foles and not Blake Bortles. So Westbrook could approach 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns this season. Would not shock me at all. I love getting him, as the 35th wide receiver. I'll take him somewhere in the 9th round, 8th round, and be very, very happy with my selection. All right, next up we have James Washington. This is the Steelers wide receiver who is taking over for Juju. As Antonio Brown leaves, Juju gets bumped up to wide receiver number 1. I'm hoping that James Washington will be wide receiver number 2. He's being drafted as the 48th wide receiver overall or 142nd. Antonio Brown obviously left town, and so can Washington become that number 2 wide receiver in Pittsburgh? His stats were horrible. I admit it. He did not have a good year last year. He caught only, 16 balls on 38 targets. That's not really a good percentage for all you math majors out there. That's less than 50%. So you don't really want to throw the ball to a guy who's dropping half of the passes. But, I still have value out there on James Washington. This could be a big year for him. he's definitely an upside play, right? He should get a jump in targets. There's no doubt about that. If he gets 80 targets in 2019, he will be a valuable player. So can he catch those targets? Can he hold on to them? And then what can he do once he gets them? I figure, it's worth a gamble. 12th round, 13th round. If James Washington is still out there, I don't mind having him at all as my wide receiver 4 or 5. I think he's worth a gamble this year in fantasy football with Antonio Brown leaving town. All right, so that's 3 guys. Let's move over to our 4th wide receiver, who's basically going undrafted. So the rookies in the draft this year, they're a talented group, but there really isn't that overwhelming top talent like there has been in the past. There's no Julio Jones out of this group that's going to come in and just blow everybody away right away. So they're going to need, time to adjust to the NFL game. Well, Mecole Hardman is the only rookie wide receiver that I really am interested in from a fantasy perspective. So let's go with the assumption that Hill is not going to play for at least a big portion of this season. We haven't heard anything about that meeting yet that he had with the NFL the other day, but I'm just going to assume that Hill is out for most of the year. Well, Hardman will have value in that situation. Okay. Worst case scenario, he's wide receiver 3 in the best offense in football. That has value. And Hardman is a freak athlete who's electric with the ball. Now, at Georgia, he only had 60 catches in his 3 seasons there, but I don't care. The Chiefs will create strategies to get them the ball in space. And, it certainly isn't clear how many touches Hardman will get. That's why I'm drafting him as my last pick before my defense and kicker, right? But he could be, this is a huge swing for upside here. It's all about ceiling. The floor is he doesn't catch a single ball this year, but he does have the upside to go in there. And maybe he's just the second wide receiver behind Watkins. That's certainly possible. And, with a guy with that much explosive athletic ability, they're going to be trying to get him the ball, put him into that Hill role. Obviously, he's not going to be running the same route trees that Hill ran, but he's being drafted as the 50th wide receiver overall. So I don't mind drafting him at all at the end of drafts and taking a shot on this rookie from Kansas City and the best offense in football. All right, finally, we have Adam Humphries. He was with Tampa Bay last year, and he finished as the 31st ranked wide receiver. Well, Humphries has moved on to Tennessee this season, but his production, I would assume, will remain about the same out of the slot. He managed to haul in 5 touchdowns on 76 catches with 816 yards last year. Mariota should look to him as kind of a safety blanket this year, I would imagine. Mariota's not a guy who's going to hang in the pocket and throw the ball deep, so he'll be looking to hit Adam Humphries early and often, I would assume. So if we can, just say he has the same exact production he has last year, he ends up being the 31st ranked wide receiver. Well, Adam Humphries isn't even being drafted in most leagues this year. There's certainly value to take him at the end of the draft. He's kind of the complete opposite of Hardman, where you can get him at the very end of the draft for nothing. If you have a bunch of risky guys at wide receiver already, I would draft a guy like Adam Humphries at the end of the draft. However, if you have a bunch of guys you feel solid about, go ahead and take the home run shot on a guy like Hardman. It just depends how your draft is going on which wide receiver you want to make up the end of that group. And obviously in deeper leagues, Humphries' value is certainly there if you're drafting outside of the normal, 10 or 12 team leagues. He's certainly a guy you're going to want to take at the end of the draft. Again, he's going as wide receiver number, I think 56, something like that. But he's a great option. He has wide receiver 3 value at basically no cost to you at all, as he's being able to be picked up at the end of drafts or for $1 or $2 at the end of an auction draft. All right, that is it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please check out our sponsor, www.mathradio.com, to pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe. Leave us any comments or questions below. And if you're listening to a podcast, we'd love a 5-star rating and a nice review on either iTunes or Spotify. We will be back tomorrow on Sunday to discuss the NBA free agency and anything that happens. We'll see you then.